fun.
He was closed for a long time because they were renovating.
Yeah, but now it's amazing, beautiful, yeah,
They
yeah.
lost touch a little bit. Comparatively, when they're far from the other, so you were able to share the co-posting. Remember, so it couldn't have been that. Oh. There.
Hi, Margaret.
Hello. Good morning. I just.
There's a new one over there, Margaret. There's a new one.
Say, 3 seats to right of the.
He is to the right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's noon. We're here. We're gonna have some fun, I hope. And if not, complain to somebody else. No, it's good to have everybody back. Want to invite those of you who are at home as best you can, not to be impolite, but to keep your microphones on mute. You have no idea how noisy your homes are and how powerful our speakers are here in the room. For those of us in the room, if you don't have a text sheet, I think everybody has one. So what we are discussing, and we're gonna get started, is this idea of the Mahloket. And for those of you for whom this is, this is week 3 of a 4-week thing. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome, we're thrilled you're here. And I'll spend about 5 or 6 minutes getting everyone back up to the same page so we can move forward. The idea of the Mahloket is the eternal debate, right? An idea or a concept that there are certain questions that will always remain, that there's ideas on this side and there are ideas on that side, and neither side of the debate has a monopoly on wisdom, right? So I'm gonna quickly share some of the sources we have looked at earlier in our conversation, just to give us a little bit of context as to what it is that we're talking about. So for those of you who are in the room, these are last week's source sheets. I don't have them with me to share, but I can just invite you to look at the screen, but we're not gonna be looking at them for very long. Make it a little bit bigger, so a little bit easier to read, especially those of us who are here in person. Do one more, boop, okay. So one idea is, and this is in this first text from the Midrash, that when God was giving the laws to Moses, God said that each law had 49 faces, 49 facets, 49 interpretations, that the law would lean in one direction, and 49 facets the law would lean in the other direction. So with any question, it's not like there's always an obvious, clear way to understand what the law is suggesting, that we should presume that the law could be interpreted one way or the other, and that is a feature, not a bug, of the Jewish tradition. And so when someone says, no, Torah says X, you could say, it does say X, but it also says things that are not exactly X, a little bit different than X. And this opens up for debate. The classic text about the Mahloket is the text from Pirkei Avot that says a disagreement, a Mahloket, that is for the sake of heaven, that is l'shem shamayim, is one that will endure, and one that is not for the sake of heaven will not. The classic example of the debate, the Mahloket l'shem shamayim, are the debates between Hillel and Shammai, right? In those debates, ultimately we choose a direction to go in. The good example I've been using is we decided to follow the lighting of the menorah at Hanukkah, and following with the opinion of Beit Hillel, who said we should light 1 candle the first night, up to 8 candles the last night, even though the wisdom of Shammai would suggest that if you want to really recreate the miracle of the dwindling miraculous amount of oil, it would make sense to begin with 8 candles and then go down to 1. Was Shammai wrong? No, Shammai was not wrong. It's just that we chose to follow Hillel. That's the idea of the Mahloket. It's not about right and wrong. It's not about winning and losing. It's about entering into a disagreement, a debate, an argument, a conversation, a discussion, the ultimate purpose of which is expanding our minds, not winning the day. The opposite example is the debate of Korach, right? Korach, who led a mutiny or attempted mutiny against Moses in the desert, because he asked, who chose Moses to be the leader? I could be the leader. And of course, God said, I chose Moses to be the leader, and Korach, you're going to fall into the earth, and he and his followers were swallowed up. That was not a good attempt at a mahloket. How do we fast forward this? How do we incorporate this to our own experience, right? We are here, I'm assuming you're all here today, and I'm here today because we realized that the skill of recognizing that machlokot continue to exist. That a temperament that doesn't mean that every conversation I have with every person I meet, I have to win. And you have to be wrong for me to be right. And I have to be wrong for you to be right. But that is not a good and healthy way to go about the world. And too many people, especially today, go about the world in that way. Are there debates where there's a right and a wrong? There are. Those are not machlokot l'shem shamayim, and not everything has to be. Right? For people who think chocolate is better than vanilla, should get swallowed up by the earth. No, I'm kidding. But that's I don't know if that's l'shem shamayim, it's chocolate versus vanilla, but there's no answer there. But we can think about various debates that go on in the society. We can have the debates with the purpose which is to win and spill the blood of our opponents. Or we can enter the debate with the goal of expanding our knowledge and understanding. And I've used this example a few times. The debate about abortion access. Now, I certainly have things that I hope to win. And this synagogue spent the last 6 months collecting 6,600 petitions, hoping that a vote in November will come in the state of Florida to restore abortion access in the state of Florida. And I pay good attention to the arguments that those on the other side of the argument make, because I want to understand what they're thinking. I want to understand why they think what they think. Do I think all their arguments are sound? No. Do I think they're always arguing in good faith? No. Are there examples when they are? Yes. Right? And one of the big debates that I think we can say is an example of the Mahloket l'shem shamayim, that's a subtext of the abortion debate, is this question of, when does life begin? Our tradition has an answer to that question, or has ways to understand that question. Other traditions have different ways to understand that question. And in some ways, the debate diverges based on that single opinion. Why? Well, because as God told Moses, there are different facets to every position. Right? If life begins at conception, it sets a different set of burdens as to what the conceived zygote and embryo require than if life doesn't begin at conception. Right? And our tradition talks about a woman who's carrying a child and the as yet unborn fetus in her womb as having different sets of burdens and expectations and protections at various points along the way, which complicates the conversation. There's what to discuss there. So in terms of what headspace should we be in if we are trying to participate in a mahloket l'shem shamayim, right? And invite others to join us in that headspace, here are a few things to keep in mind. 1, debate the issues without attacking people or harming relationships. In a good mahloket, you love your opponent more after than before, because you get to know their heart and soul better as a result of the experience. 2, check your motivations. Are you trying to win or understand? Are you trying to win or solve a problem? I heard someone discuss that she's a marriage and family therapist. You probably have said these words before. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right? This notion that maintaining the relationship is more important than the intellectual victory. And if you can keep that headspace, you can actually expand both parties or all the parties' intellectual positions by not going for the jugular, so to speak, in the debate. Number 3, listen to the other side and be open to admitting that you might be wrong. I'll go back to the abortion example. The text that we're looking at on the screen is not the ones you in the room have in hand. In hand are the text for today. This is last week's. I'm just doing a review. If I become convinced, if I'm a person who is a supporter of abortion rights and abortion access, at least in some capacity, if I become convinced that the fertilized egg is a fully formed life, I'm going to be changing my opinion. I'm probably not that's going to happen to me, I don't think. But there may be things I learned along the way where I realize, I was wrong. What I thought was right and correct is no longer. I was having a conversation with some folks on our religious school team because there was a parent who raised the question. We read the Lorax over the weekend in religious school, right, about speaking for the trees in preparation for Tu B'Shvat, which is coming this week. Some of Dr. Seuss's earlier writings had depictions of ethnic minorities that would not be considered to be appropriate in today's world. And I can say it wasn't appropriate then, but was accepted as appropriate then in the time. And so some libraries have pulled some of Dr. Seuss's volumes off the shelves because they don't want to continue to perpetuate those stereotypes. There was a parent who raised a question, basically, shouldn't all of Dr. Seuss's books be stricken? I don't think so, and our school team doesn't think so, but that was the debate. But, you know, what we thought was a good and couth is no longer couth. If you've seen some of the earlier Disney movies, right? Peter Pan, Dumbo, has certain depictions that it's not appropriate. It's offensive. And Disney has gone so far, Disney Plus, to put a disclaimer at the beginning of those films. They made the decision to put them on the platform with the disclaimer. They made a different decision for Song of the South. And they said, we're not going to put it on at all. They learned our minds can be changed if we keep an open mind. Fourth, consider that you might both be right, despite holding opposite opinions. Hillel and Shammai are both right, even when you have to make a decision to go in one direction or the other. Which is better, chocolate or vanilla? Who thinks chocolate? Who thinks vanilla?
We're gonna get a swirl.
You're both right. Maybe you want to get a swirl. Maybe you just want chocolate today. I very rarely eat chocolate. I usually go for vanilla, but every once in a while, I just had a hankering for chocolate. Or chocolate and banana if they have it. We talked about the elephant and the rider. That emotionally, when we get into a debate, we often become a rider, an elephant that has a rider on top. Right? The elephant moves out of emotion, visceral automatically, and it's not easy to change an elephant's direction. But our conscious verbal thinking brain is in charge if we let it be. The hard part is reminding ourselves not to let the elephant run away with the debate. Okay, that is where we were. Here is where we are. Let me blow up the text so folks can see it more easily. So we're going to begin with this question of, in the debate, what motivates people? And I want to share with you a paradigm that was created by an organization called Moral Foundations, and this idea of moral foundations theory. The theory was developed by cultural psychologists, predominantly Jonathan Haidt and Jesse Graham, who said that within different groups of people, and it's not specific necessarily to one culture or another, that people can be motivated by different concerns, all of which are well-founded morally, but will lead to different outcomes. So for example, and these are some of the examples. One is concern for care and harm. This foundation is related to our long evolution as mammals with attachment systems and the ability to feel and dislike the pain of others. Underlying that, it underlies kindness, gentleness, and nurturance. If my primary concern is the caring for and potential harm of others, I'm going to make certain decisions. Or I could be concerned with fairness and cheating. This foundation is the process of reciprocal altruism, justice, rights, autonomy. The most important thing is that everyone gets the same size piece, even if one person needs more or less than the other. Or I'm motivated by loyalty and betrayal. This foundation is about our long history of as tribal creatures, right? Loyalty means you're loyal to a group or a person, and you form shifting coalitions. Underlying this, or this is underlined by things like patriotism and self-sacrifice. One for all and all for one. I don't care how big my cookie piece is, as long as we win as a group. That's a pretty far-fetched example. But my most important concern is that my fate is tied with those with whom I identify the most closely with, even if we're wrong. Or authority and subversion. We have a long history of hierarchy in social interactions, that who I choose to follow, who I elect as my leader, either by actual vote or emotionally elect, who I see as the people or party I want to follow, all that matters. This person is the one that we're going to follow no matter where they go. That's Korach's followers. It's also what God asks of us as Jews. But of course, in that example, Korach is not God, and neither is Chase for them. Sanctity and degradation. The foundation shaped by the psychology of disgust and contamination. Religious notions of striving to live an elevated, less carnal, more noble way. Underlies the idea that the body is a temple which can be desecrated by immoral activities and contaminants, right? We see this in a lot of religious groups, that there are certain things that we just don't do. What is an example of this within Judaism?
Don't throw children in a pit.
We don't throw children in a pit. It's a little extreme that I was thinking, but sure. I was thinking kashrut, right? We have decided as a people that eating from certain animals, it doesn't fulfill the sanctity that the Holy One has put to our feet, right? And that's the only reason why it's bad. The animal itself is not bad. The animal itself is a creation of God. We just choose to separate and sanctify ourselves by not eating that. And maybe look down our nose at those who do. Maybe not. Depends. And the last of the moral foundation is the idea of liberty as opposed to oppression. And the feelings of reactance and resentment of people feel toward those who dominate and restrict their liberty. No one is going to tell me what I can and can't do. I'm going to get a haircut in April of 2020. The law be damned. My personal freedoms are given to me by God, and no one can stop them. Right? But that also plays out as people who take advantage of this or have pushes are bullies who try to keep you from fulfilling your liberty that you're allowed to do. All of these are double-edged swords. All of these can either be beautiful manifestations of the moral good and can metastasize and be corrupted to allow for people to take advantage of them. Right? The taking advantage of sanctity and degradation is when you other people for the choices that they make, right? Or the things that they choose not to abstain from, right? So Jews looking down their nose at people who choose to eat pork and shellfish, that would be an example that you're holding yourself literally to a higher moral place because you do and they don't. Okay? And the theory suggests that each one of us we're wired for one or two of these. And it's just based on who we are. None of these are better or worse than the other, but we typically have one or two of these that our psychology would suggest for ourselves are the things that we are the most motivated by. It's different for every person. So just take a moment as you digest this. And for those of you at home, I'm going to try to put all of them up on the screen at one time. There we go. For those of you here in the room, take a look and see. And just ask yourself, which one of these do you think that you are most, one or two of these do you think you are the most motivated by? I'm not going to ask this of everybody, but is there anyone who feels comfortable sharing which of the moral foundations they are motivated by?
think B for me.
Fairness and cheap fairness. Margaret says fairness, that's one of mine also, for whatever that's worth.
C for me.
Loyalty. Yeah.
Is liberty
Liberty.
here?
I think for me, it's sanctity and degradation.
Anita says sanctity. I heard care. Who's that from? Philip says it's fairness. Any others?
Cheating.
Cheating, fairness and cheating. I mean, those are the same, like you can be happy when things are fair and really pissed if someone's cheating. Yeah, for sure.
Driving down on 95 just now, we were singing songs, and I can't help but notice at least 6 examples of people cheating the privileges given to them by the state of Florida.
On the roads?
Yes.
All right, right. So you are all, I'm gonna presume, morally sound people with good moral foundations. And yet by our own admission, we vary as to how we answer this.
Can I answer? Two,
Sure,
F, liberty and.
liberty and oppression. You care for the freedom of others and yourself, for sure. My 2 things I think about those are care, A and B, care for others and fairness. And boy, do they go in tension with each other. So think about this for a moment, right? We're building on something here. We said at the outset that any moral question, any question is gonna have a variety of facets. Well, how could that be? Well, now we know why. Because morality has an overarching motivation, but the set of criteria that describes what is and isn't moral, right? There's different ways to think about it. If I'm concerned most with fairness, then maybe Moses doesn't get to be the leader of the whole thing. Maybe we gotta take turns, right? The city of Beverly Hills goes around and every citizen gets to be mayor. It's a very weird thing that they do. They don't elect a leader, they do it in different ways. That's a little more fair. Or kooky. Well, it's Beverly Hills, so of course it's kooky.
The problem exists that one group of people may think something is perfectly okay and moral,
Mm-hmm.
and another group does not.
So Margaret says that the problem is that one person or group of people may say that something is moral and another group might not. Yes, that's the point of this. This is to show us that the same question of morality may actually be answered differently, and this gives an explanation as to why that could be, right? Because depending on which one of these foundations I'm acting upon, I may decide that this situation is either morally found or not morally well-founded, right? But if we pull back for a moment to the ideas of Mahloket, what I shouldn't say to you is, you're an immoral person because you and I disagree on the morality of this particular question. What this is challenging us to say is, oh, this person, this party, and I disagree on a particular moral question. I should at least ask and I know I should ask myself, what is my foundation that I'm acting upon that's motivating me to say this situation is moral or it isn't? But if I want to be one of these elevated people who looks down there, who feels good about myself and my morality, this is suggesting that when someone comes to a moral conclusion that I disagree with, one way to better understand them, to do that work of not winning and losing, but understanding, is to ask myself, oh, which moral foundation or moral foundations might be informing my opponent in this debate that would allow them to make that kind of conclusion.
But how do you get the other person to calmly have this discussion?
So that's a practical question. And for those online, the question was, how do we get the other person to calmly enter this debate? I think there's a few ways to do it. This is not going to happen on talk radio or on a Facebook conversation on a website, right? Some of this is when they used to have salons, right? When people would come be there for the purpose of having a debate. These are the kind of things that they were motivated by, right? That's number one. Number two is you show through example, right? So imagine how it would feel if you were in a debate with someone and your opponent says to you, I totally understand why you think what you think, why you feel how you feel, right? You are activated and motivated by a concern for fairness, which is a really important moral foundation. But I'm more concerned with liberty and their intention. That is a way to show so much respect for you're not saying that they're wrong, they're saying to you, you're not wrong, just that we see this differently. Some people will still not listen to you, and they like to have their fights on talk radio, right? But this is about creating an environment where we can actually have this. You can be deliberate about it, you can talk about it, it depends on who you're doing. You can't make everybody do it this way, but you can certainly make sure it doesn't happen is if you don't do it either. By the way, how was the show Sunday night? I saw you I couldn't get a chance to say hello. You like it? Yeah.
Did you?
I did too. We were both at Hadestown on Sunday nights, so that was good. It was good.
I look at the broad picture, and what you were just saying, talk to me about what happens in a trial.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody morally justifies what they're doing versus them being convicted because the law says something.
Right.
And then there is the government that imposes what is moral and not moral by creating laws.
Right.
Which you can and cannot do.
Right.
So I'm just saying there's a lot of in this mix.
Yeah.
Here, as well as people feel based on priorities, as you said, what is more important to them or what their religious leaders,
Mm-hmm.
political leaders tell them. And they just adopt that as a priority and discount other people.
I'm gonna put out a straw man to prove your point. Think for a moment about the fight for voting rights in the Deep South in the 60s. You have the concept of fairness. Everyone should get to vote.
Mhm.
And liberty. And we have, at least in our society, in most communities, elected officials who have the authority to enforce the laws. That's their power. You look at number D. Think about for a moment, and these are not good examples of people, the law enforcement officials, the voting rights officials, right? The registrars of voters, the clerks in these counties. It's their authority. They said, I get to decide who gets to vote. This is what the law empowers me to see to it that the laws are followed. Now, this is a broken example, right? Because we know from later time that they were standing on, there was a false sense of authority and they were actively ignoring part of the law intentionally. But there are points in which these ideas can come into tension. A court case where someone says, another example, or taking a theater from it, the story of Les Miserables and Jean Valjean, right? Steals a loaf of bread to feed his starving family. The person he stole the bread from is not going to miss that bread. They can buy a new one, right? But it's wrong. Stealing is wrong. Authority should say that. Fairness should say that. Liberty should say that. And but our concern, our care, it's wrong that everyone should be impoverished. It's not the responsibility of one person to pay for everything, but there's tension in these ideas. And so the next time you're in a debate, if you're able to at least, and you can be really deliberate like Linda suggested, or you can just ask yourself, can I identify what is the moral foundation motivating the person I'm in this debate with? It will help you better understand what they are trying to say and not make it about they're wrong and I'm right, or they're bad and I'm good, or vice versa.
But which of these falls in line with the you're wrong and I'm right?
None of them.
Right.
All of them, none of them.
Sometimes you do have a debate.
Sure.
You're gonna call it.
Right.
With somebody who that's their motivation.
Well, so acting out of, just to be clear, acting out of concern for care or fairness or loyalty or authority or sanctity or liberty, right? You can't do all six at once. It's impossible, right? The thesis I'm suggesting here is that most of us tend to act out of one or two, maybe three of these. And if you're acting openly and honestly and intellectually honestly and not, So the example of the Deep South clerk was it had a corrupt expression of these things. But if you have a legitimate expression of these things, it is possible that two people would starkly disagree. Because fairness and care may in fact come into conflict, right? Which creates a system like we have where I work hard, I get paid, I have money, I have what I need, and there are people who don't. And I have care and concern for them. But how much of what I have should I give to make sure that their needs are met? That's not fair. I earn what I got. And there's a certain level of, in our society, we say, okay, you're gonna get taxed. I mean, taxes, I mean, and most of the answer to most of these is we find a balance where we can hold on to both of these to some degree. But no matter where the balance is set, most people would say, well, there's not enough of one of these and too much of the other for my particular taste. Right? Or if you're in a situation where the answer has to be a binary, we're either gonna go this way or we're gonna go that way, a la the question of the Hillel and Shammai, at the end of the day, you gotta pick one or the other. But the point is, picking one or the other doesn't mean that the person who wasn't picked was not good and moral and firm and strong and sound, I should say. It's just that sometimes you gotta choose.
I think, for me, as I'm listening, you have to really understand in each discussion that you're having with another person, where you're coming from in that discussion, because it can change your moral groundwork.
Absolutely.
Can change depending upon the situation that you're in. But you also used the term at the very beginning of this, your opponent. And that kind of rocked me, because if we see the people that we're having a discussion with or a debate as an opponent, then we're in trouble.
Well, so opponent is short of an enemy, right? There's a great joke about the US Congress, right? And this goes back an old way, where a freshman member of the Congress says to a member of his caucus, take me, I want to see the other party. Why? I want to see the enemy. And the more senior congressperson says to the junior one, no, the opposing party isn't the enemy, they're the opposition. The Senate is the enemy. Okay? So opposition, I say that not to suggest that there's a moral judgment there. Enemy is, you can decide which words you want to use, which is the comfortable space, which is the uncomfortable space. I used opponent to say, no, we're having a debate, right? Yes, do I want to win the debate? Yes, I do. But this is an intellectual exercise, right? When I was in high school, I did debates and I had an opponent, right? And at 1 o'clock, I would debate someone and I would say yay to the resolution and they would say nay. And then an hour later, we would switch and I would debate somebody else on the other side, right? And then in that moment, they were my opponents. They were my enemy. Right?
A little hard for me to
Then I would love,
accept the word.
if you want to suggest, I'm open to other, I'm not, that doesn't go, what word would you like to use? I'll use that one.
It's not an argument,
Yeah,
about it, just for me
Sure.
personally, the word opponent is.
how about sparring partner?
How about the person you're talking with, or
Okay.
your fellow debater, or anything other, for me?
Sure.
Personally, opponent is loaded.
Please know that I wasn't attaching loads to there, but if I understand why you would feel that.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
a story,
Good moral basis.
a story. There once was a good man, a religious man, an orthodox man, if that means they're a good religious person. He followed the tradition closely. He spent his entire life helping sick people receive the medical treatment they needed. He didn't care if they were good people or bad people, didn't care if they were men or women, Jews or Muslims, religious or secular. He looked after anyone who needed help because he saw that what he had to do as a religious man. One day he began organizing his annual fundraising event and succeeded in getting a lot of pop stars to perform on stage. Lots of stars means lots of tickets, lots of donations. Lots of donations means more and more people getting the care that they need because of the money he raised. He was delighted. Publicity was sent far and wide. But with the publicity out, what was realized was that everyone on the performance bill, was male. It's almost as if women were being kept away from the stage deliberately. And as it turns out, they were. Because as I mentioned, the man was a religious Orthodox man, and his religious values teach that women cannot sing in front of men. For those who are not familiar, there is an idea that is followed within Orthodoxy called Kol Isha, that the voice of a woman is inappropriate to be shared in front of men. And this is a tension that I will share with you continues to today, and in this great communal, cooperative community of Jewish Boca Raton, this is probably the most difficult thing for us to work through. Right? We can do events with the Orthodox synagogue all the time, and Kol Isha always comes up. Everyone told the good man that he could not have a public event that refused to let any women on stage. It would be like saying women didn't matter. But the good man's supporters knew it would be crazy to expect him to ignore his religious beliefs when raising money for a charity built on those beliefs. Gradually, one by one, the artists began pulling out of the event. They said they were happy to perform, but only if women could perform too. But the good man could not agree to host an event that undermined his own values. Everything was on a knife's edge. Would the event take place that had consciously and deliberately excluded women? Or would it be canceled, ensuring that far fewer people would be helped by the man who wished to help them? The argument had only begun. Margaret, go ahead.
Would women have been allowed to come to the event? Just sit separately?
To listen, they could, so they can listen, right? Women are allowed to hear the voices of men. Yeah. No, listen, this plays out in Boca Raton all the time.
Yeah.
We're trying to get together and do a Yom HaShoah events, right? And we want to invite the whole Jewish community. We have female cantors. We insist that they sing. They are full members of our team. You know, we don't make any discrimination between the genders. And so if we're going to participate, our cantors need to have, an opportunity to sing, because we're going to get up and we're going to sing Oifen Porpachik or whatever we're going to sing to observe Yom HaShoah, or the same conversation on Yom HaAtzmaut. And our Orthodox colleagues say, well, we're not going to come if women are going to sing. And we're going to say, we're not going to come if women aren't going to sing.
My daughter lives in Israel, she is religious, and they experience this, of course, all the time. She will not sing publicly or play, she's a musician who plays instruments, but what they do is hold separate fundraising activities.
Only for women. Right. Right,
Guess what? But they don't make a public
right.
deal out of it, but she could be seen holding events and creating events
Yeah.
for.
Right.
So it's a separate but equal kind of thing.
Right.
That's how they address it.
Margaret.
I always feel it's something, I mean, I understand what you're telling me, but since it's an issue for one group like that, I would pander to that group. I mean.
Which group? The Orthodox group?
Yeah. Cause with what, listen,
Margaret suggested, and I actually don't want to have this conversation, because I don't want to bring up our individual, like, this isn't about how we feel about this, like, we want to just understand what's going on.
I'm struck.
Yeah. All right. So, this story, a man who's deeply committed to tzedakah and meeting the medical needs of anyone, irrespective of their background. A man who's deeply committed to his Orthodox Jewish principles, including the concern of Kol Isha. What moral foundation or foundations do we see manifest in this story?
Care.
Care, for sure, there's care, right? Care for everybody, for the needs, good.
Sanctity, degradation.
Sanctity and degradation, right? What's being sanctified or potentially degraded?
Just use of the word called Yisha, and where that comes from, and the source of it can be quoted in detail, is, so it's a sanctified worship.
But that you mean that the notion of Kol Isha
Yes.
is one that suggests that a voice of a woman is to be sanctified, only utilized in certain places, and when used in the wrong place is a degradation.
It's sanctified in the sense you can tie it back to a particular mitzvah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have care, we have sanctity,
Liberty oppression.
liberty, oppression.
Women are being treated as though they are less than.
Uh-huh.
Being oppressed, separate, other.
Uh-huh.
And that puts them in a different category, so
Mm-hmm.
that's not right, that's not fair.
I think that's a close overlap with fairness as well. Liberty and fairness is a close overlap.
But they are being oppressed in.
Absolutely, right. So we've got care, we've got liberty, we've got fairness, we've got sanctity.
Easy.
He's being loyal and he has loyal people with him. Right? The good man's supporters knew it would be crazy to expect him to ignore his religious beliefs. There's loyalty there as well.
And authority.
Whose authority?
His
His authority.
because he's the hierarchy.
It's his event.
Yeah.
Right.
Virtue of leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you've got certain people saying that they're gonna pull out, they're not gonna, they're gonna walk away, right? So instead of authority, we're gonna have, and we're gonna have, we'll subvert, right? We will do what they need us to do, right? So in the story, you've identified how all of these different moral foundations play out. Now, I would imagine, and one of us has already tipped her hand, that each of us have in our kishkis an inclination as to what the right and good thing to do is in this particular instance. And if I were to go around the room, we'd probably have a mix, although I would imagine, and I could be wrong, we could play this game if everyone's comfortable with the answer, to see what this crowd might say. Can we play this game? Can we agree not to look down upon the person whose hand doesn't go up when ours goes up? Because that would defeat the purpose of the whole class. Right? Because the whole purpose of this is to realize that the people who we might disagree with, who we might find ourselves in opposition with, they have a moral foundation they're standing on. Microphone back on. Sorry, at home, we lost the mic for a second. The room reset. We're good. Anita, can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me at home. All right. So what I was saying, what we're about to do is that if I were to go around the room and ask everyone to vote on whether they want to have the concert or not, some might say yes and some might say no. I'd be curious to see what this room would say. And we don't want to besmirk anyone for thinking differently. Before I ask you the question.
Yes, it relates to this. It's a philosophical question.
Okay.
Would the Orthodox take donations from a group that allows men and women to participate fully and is not in line with their moral beliefs?
So orthodoxy is not a monolith. So my easy answer is some would and many would not.
Okay.
Right? There's certainly in orthodoxy a piece of this also, which is like you can't have fruit of the poison tree. Right? So if you're a person who's kosher and shomer Shabbat, not only do you not cook food on Shabbat, you won't eat food that was cooked on Shabbat. Right? So there is like a down the line element, but I can't speak to where they would draw the line or where one Jew might draw the line in one instance. Okay. So just for funsies, no getting mad at each other. Raise your hand if you think the concert should go forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hands with those online.
But.
With no buts, this is the binary, and I'm gonna keep you from saying but. Stop, no. And raise your hand if you think that the concert should not go on. Because of the concerns. 1, 2. And a bunch of abstentions. People didn't vote, right? This is a complicated moral question that has multiple facets. And yet, there has to be, at a certain point, the binary decision has to be made. Either there's gonna be a concert or there isn't. This was the question Linda on Sunday night with Hadestown, right? If Hades lets him go, he's gutless. And if he keeps him there, he's spineless. Maybe vice versa. Oh no, if he keeps him there, he's heartless. If he lets him go, he's spineless. They're both right. And they're both not right. Judith, now you want to complicate your binary.
Well, I was thinking it should be women and men, but that hopefully the rabbi would remove himself from hosting it and sponsoring it and let it be what it needed to be to help the people that he cared about.
They're not gonna raise nearly as much money if he's not there. Because A, he's the driving factor behind the event, and B, all the people who agree with him are not gonna show up. So the event could still go on, but it would turn into something very, very different.
I think there's an addendum that's missing to this, and I'm actually an organizer and I know. If he were fair, he would host the event as morality states he wants to host it.
Yeah.
And do it. And then he would hire someone to host a separate but equal event. That would be everyone combined, and this is what we do in today's day and age.
Yeah.
So that we have both running
Right.
simultaneously, whatever, whether he shows up or he doesn't show up, he's got an added value.
That's a way to square the circle, but I think the question from before also suggests that part of what motivates some, if not many, Orthodox Jews is they are not going to traffic in things that they see to be a violation. He will not endorse the idea of a secondary event because he doesn't want to be associated for his moral principles, his concern for sanctity of anything where Kol Isha would be taking place. That would be a violation of one of his moral principles. So it's not that simple. It's a good idea. It's an ingenious and innovative idea, but it doesn't work because
But therein lies the issue, because if he were truly a moral man, he would not be thinking about himself or even God. He would be thinking about the sick
I
people.
want to push you back on what you just said.
Because the sick people are his audience.
Right,
and
so
they
you
matter.
used a very loaded phrase there. A truly moral man, right? What I'm suggesting is there are different ways to be moral. That if you really want to be able to engage in a Mahloket L'Shem Shamayim, I'm gonna be very direct, it is not helpful to say this person is truly moral or not. Because it breaks down, what's that? To a degree, right? Which one of the moral principles matters more?
The recipients are the ones who are hurt, the potential people get.
Yep.
So if the more religious man thinks ahead, he would allow more, or his flexibility might be affected. And that again is not a binary decision. Yes, yes or no. It's math. It's about the way you have structured.
But the way you get there also has a moral factor. He's gonna say, even if it costs me less collections, I can't violate this other moral principle.
Which is why we have a separate.
Or a separate group can do it all, and he's not gonna do that, right? We have, by the way, in our tradition, that double-edged sword piece, right? One of my favorite teachings from Deuteronomy, tzedek tirdo. Justice you shall pursue, right? And the rabbis asked the question, why does the word tzedek, justice, why is it doubled? What do we learn from the fact that it says it twice? And one of the answers is that it's not only the outcomes that matter, but the methodologies matter as well, right? So yes, the outcome of collecting as much money as possible for the care is really, really important, but you can't break other rules to get there. And for him, his concern for Kol Isha is a co-equal important rule. He will only do what following both principles will allow him to do. He's not going to maximize one over the other.
Is this not with any moral dilemma, like the abortion rule, which I strongly disagree with the 6 weeks, but if somebody is a religious Pentecostal, they really morally feel it's wrong.
Right? And the complicating factor in that particular instance is also that we're talking about the question of, is it the Pentecostal person's business what somebody else does? Right? That's what makes the abortion debate more challenging, is it's not like saying that, everyone has to have an abortion at 6 weeks. It's this question of may you and can you? And that's where it gets where the intersecting moral values gets more complicated. I want to move forward, so we'll go one more round around, and Margaret, I'll end with you, we'll go around this way, and then we'll move forward.
So I just looked up the definition of morality and the simple principles of right and wrong, Aristotle's right and wrong, is, the question is, for me, is the right of feeding or helping people who are sick, who need the help, is a baseline right or wrong morality. So then you're not holding that audience hostage to the egocentric morality of this one man, that he may be right and is entitled to that morality. But if that morality has a direct impact and influence on a mass population of sick people who will die, then are we not holding that audience?
Why don't we just take his credit card, rob his bank account, they can take all his money?
Well, no, the question is, why doesn't he put his ego aside and say, I can still be nice?
The part that I want to push back on is this notion that there's only a single criterion for morality, right? And you may push back on this entire conversation, but what I'm suggesting in this conversation is that these different moral foundations are co-equal criteria of morality. That the actual way we live in the world is that there are different ways to define what is and isn't moral. You can be acting morally because you're acting out of care, or acting morally because you're concerned out of fairness, or of authority, or loyalty, or sanctity, or liberty. And that they're all, in theory, equally valid. And that the lived human experience is not the Aristotelian ideal, but that most of the time when we're asked to make a hard question, it's not because there's a clear answer and a clear unanswer. It's the hard questions come from when these moral foundations are in tension. And what's going to happen is different people are going to, understandably, prioritize and triage different of these foundations over others. And that's how we went around. We all share what we're wired by, right? And many people in this room, because you're at a Reformed synagogue in 2024, are motivated in part by fairness. Anita, can you hear me? Now you can. Okay. So my apologies to those at home. We're having some issues with the owl. We stopped the conversation before we continued, so you didn't miss anything. I'm going to pick up from where I was, right? We have these criteria. We have these different co-equal moral principles, and each of us are motivated by different things, and each of us are going to triage them in different ways. And this group of people tends to be a group that leans towards fairness, especially fairness between the genders. And we know that because you're in a Reformed synagogue in 2024. Whether you're a member here or not, you're at least in the building on a Tuesday, something about this place calls to you. And we know that the Reform movement is compelled by, among other things, fairness. It's one of our, we prioritize it over other values in ways that other Jewish parts of the Jewish community might make different decisions, like prioritizing sanctity. I'm suggesting it may be better to see our disagreements as different expressions of this moral network and moral framework than we are moral and they are not. Or we are more moral than they are because of the decisions that we make. If that doesn't work for you, okay. This is what I'm laying out. A story. I want to move forward, and we're short on time. And we'll do some last comments. A story from our tradition. Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, and instructed them as follows: thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I stayed with Laban and remain until now. I've acquired cattle, asses, sheep, and male and female slaves, and I send this message to my lord in the hope of gaining your favor. The messengers returned to Jacob saying, we have come to your brother Esau. He himself is coming to meet you, and there are over 400 men with him. Jacob was greatly frightened, and his anxiety, he divided the people with him and the flocks and herds and camels into 2 camps, thinking if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, the other camp might yet escape. All right. So, what's going on here? Quick refresher. Earlier in their lives, when they were growing up and living at home, at multiple points throughout the way, Jacob took from Esau. Took because it was given, but took nonetheless. Right? First, he convinces Esau to sell him his birthright in exchange for a pot of lentil stew when Esau had the hungry meanies from working out in the field all day and was making poor decisions because he was hypoglycemic. The hungry meanies is when you're hungry and you get mean. Anyone else have that? It's hangry. Hungry meanies is fun because it rhymes, but it's the same idea. Second episode at the end of his life, when Isaac is there to give his blessing to the son, Jacob dresses up like Esau by putting on the animal skins and wearing his brother's coat, stealing his brother's blessing, which his mother told him to do. At which point, Rebecca realized that if she doesn't intervene and send Jacob away, she's going to lose 2 sons, one to fratricide and one to the criminal justice system. So she sends Jacob to live with her brother, with her father, Laban, his uncle. And now many years later, Jacob and Esau have each turned into adults with families and flocks, and they're about to have a reunification. What is motivating Jacob in this moment? Fear. What is he afraid of? Vengeance. From whom? Esau, from Esau. Why? Because he's done him wrong in the past. Right? I got to be honest, when I read this text, and this is always a struggle for me, our tradition makes Esau out to be very close to a pretty evil person. Nothing he does is right if you read the rabbinic tradition. And I struggle with that because when I read the story of Jacob and Esau, the ones I share with you in this one, when I'm the person who comes at this from fairness, who was mistreated in all of this? Esau. Right? But what motivates our tradition to suggest that Jacob is the good party and Esau is the bad party? Might I suggest loyalty and authority? Jacob is the one who is loyal to God. Jacob is the one who submits to the authority of God, who follows the sanctifications that God asks of him. And so to whom do we owe our loyalty as Jews? Jacob. Yeah. Also tribal, right? Building a tribe, yeah. 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 Right? And we have in our, I'm going to be honest, we have in our tradition, I would suggest, a little bit of a blind spot for when our ancestors make mistakes. Because we want to hold them up as paragons. Yeah. They are human beings. Right. The mother was a piece of work also. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. 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 And by the way, it comes from both sides because Jacob, after having stolen his brother's blessing and his birthrights, and then who does he go to find a wife from? That same Laban who took him in when he was in peril. And what does Laban do to him? Makes him marry the wrong daughter and work for an extra 7 years for free. These people.
Karma.
All right, we have about 2 minutes. There were a last few comments that I wanted to let.
You kind of touched upon it.
Okay.
Because I think in the last argument, I think there are groups of religious people, whether it's Orthodox or any other religion, to say that I am interpreting the word of God. God told me. So it doesn't come from ego, it comes from a black and white source.
That's that authority loyalty
Yes.
piece.
Black and white source. So it's not a matter of standing up to their principles. They're kind of pushing it off and saying, you know, this is God's word.
Yeah.
And I am, you know, here interpreting it.
Yep. Margaret, you had a comment before?
Well, I'm getting back to the rabbi.
Yeah.
This was his party.
Uh-huh.
It's about him and his charity.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty well know, and the Orthodox people should know that it's about men. It's gonna be men there. Nothing wrong with that. I'll bet you everybody here has had some type of an event, they're going to
Right.
some affair, and it's just for certain sex. Somebody who's just this way
So,
or that way.
For the sake of time, I want to share what you said for those who were at home who couldn't hear. Margaret's saying, listen, we know this guy. We know it was going to be a male-only event. And I had the same wondering. The only thing that I would say to complicate it is maybe this is the first time his fundraiser was a musical event. Right? If he had done fundraisers in years past that weren't musical events, his commitment to the laws of Kol Isha may have never come out. And so, you know, if it was just a golf tournament and everyone was welcome to play in, irrespective of their gender, they may not have known that this was a moral line he was not going to cross. So for the sake of understanding that we have to suspend disbelief to have the conversation, but if we knew this is who he was, then why are we having this fight all over again? For sure. Last 1, 2, 3, and then we're done.
They said that the male performers were backing out.
That's right.
Mhm.
So if in fact,
Right.
I mean, there could be no event.
Potentially.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's about respect.
Yeah.
Making a promise. And.
Yeah.
not-
So he's going to go find other performers. I mean, this is, you know, the performers back out and we'll see.
Bring in Kletzman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that and say, there's also, I think, a sense of independence and autonomy from morality. Because as human beings, there's not one of us that runs on pure morality. We have imperfections
Sure.
and innate flaws.
Yeah.
So when I said the word ego, I meant that the imperfection, the innate flaws
Mhm.
of the man,
Mm-hmm.
the person,
Mhm.
and the individual
Mhm.
does come into play because no one is God on earth
Right.
and running on pure morality.
Sure.
They're also running on a subjective force
Right.
of opinions and frame of reference and background
Yep.
and gender support. And
Right.
so to me, that does fall under the umbrella of ego. because
Potentially.
It doesn't have anything to do with. morality.
Potentially.
It is there, it is present.
Absolutely. And my only warning would be for all of us is it's very easy to blame every disagreement on the other person's ego. And because in this particular, I mean, listen, we don't know much about this man except for this example, but this example is crafted in a way to suggest that like there are clear examples of these moral principles that he is acting based on, right? And that's the tension that we're highlighting in this model of a debate. Final comments, and then we're gonna wrap up.
The beginning of this story made me think of a man who existed in Gaza, near Gaza, he was in Pardes, who would take Muslim children from Gaza, Muslim women from Gaza, regularly 3 times a week to Israel, to medical treatment centers,
Mm-hmm.
or to help them. And it was his mission, this was his role. And he was one of the first people. Part of it.
Yeah. This is a true story.
Yes.
I'm saying the example that I share with you is by a guy named Rabbi Elimelech Feirer, who had an organization just like this, who did this work and had this came up in 2019. Yeah. Yep. It's a true story.
False.
Yep.
Because we're not on these about.
Right.
We're not.
To those of you still with us on Zoom, that's going to end the conversation. We are past time. Folks are already signing off. We will pick up from here in our conclusion conversation next week. Thanks, everybody.